We need a producer.
Yes, we're gonna put out an ad for if someone wants to come in and produce our video podcast. We really need someone. We spent the last, I don't know, half hour trying to set this up, and we're hoping it's gonna be all right. You know, we don't normally do something like this, so I'm over at John's house in his garage. It's about 105 degrees. We got a fan going.
Wow.
But we had some requests. John, what were the requests we had coming in?
To go over how to change a tire.
Yeah, so it's amazing that John and I were discussing this morning, and my swim coach last night, she's going to be doing her first triathlon, and she's like, what do I do if I get a flat tire? I'm like, you got to change it. I don't know how. And I said, well, you need to learn how. And the best way to learn how probably is to do watch a podcast and then practice as you go. So we're going to give you a second here while we're talking. You want to go grab a tire, grab a wheel, grab a tube, grab your tools, and maybe you can play along with us today.
Yeah, and if someone jumps on live, hopefully someone can tell us if our audio is okay. Hopefully it's picking up nicely. And so, yeah, eventually we will do a in-person tire change, and we'll go meet up somewhere cooler.
Somewhat cooler, yeah.
Yeah, and then do a tire changing in live with people. So I don't know, where do you want to start? You want to start with the tools that we need?
Yeah, let's start with the tools that we need. So, you know, you absolutely do need tools to do this, and we're going to really talk about this from a couple different perspectives. One, if you're on the road and need to change a tire, and then secondarily, if you're in your garage or at your house, maybe you're going to have some different tools that maybe you know, aren't so portable, but might actually help you do the job a little bit easier.
All right, so I'm going to switch cameras here. Hopefully this works. Let's do. There we go. Okay, that should be. All right, this is our sort of tool table. And looks a little bleached out there. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, where do you want to start?
I guess we start at the top, right? What a tube is. Well, actually, before we even start that, and as we go, we're talking about changing tube tires, not tubeless tires. But if you had a tubeless tire and you needed to put a tube in, this would ultimately work for that.
We'll do tubeless at some point.
Yeah.
But
Yep. I've been going back and forth about switching to tubeless.
well,
I'm still not there yet, but maybe eventually. So anyways, a lot of people actually, some people might not even realize that inside your bike tire is a tube. And I know for some newer triathletes or newer cyclists, they don't know. And even my wife, when she started bike riding, every time she got a flat, she would take it to the bike shop, and they would change your tire for her. And I don't know if she even realized, that she could do it herself, and how relatively easy it is to do. So first thing to understand is there are different sizes of tubes, and in general for road bikes, you're going to be looking at something called a 700. Right, and so it's a 700, and then it'll be 700 times something, and it'll be, so this one's a 700 times 20, to a 700 times 25C.
Yep.
So the 700 talks about, no, correct me if I'm wrong, the 700 is the diameter.
Yep. Yep.
It's the diameter of the wheel.
Yeah. So it's how big the wheel is this way.
So 700 millimeters.
Yeah.
And the C, so the 25C, means the width of the wheel or the tire that this will fit in. So it goes from a 20 millimeter thick wheel or wide wheel to a 25. So this is a 23.
This is a 25.
It's a 25.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So this is the perfect tube for that. The other thing that's important to understand when you see these is there's another number, and it's on this box here. It says 42 millimeters. That's the length of the valve stem. So John's going to pull up a few valve stems here. So it looks to me like he's got a 60 in his right and an 80 in his left, or that might be a, yeah, that's
I
probably.
think this is an 80 and this is probably a 60, right?
So in general, you don't want to have a stem too much longer than your wheel will take. So for example, this wheel here, it doesn't have like a carbon fairing on it. So this is going to be the shortest
45,
one. So you could probably put a 42
yeah.
on that one. But you'll see people with these long valve stems. And the downside to a long valve stem is it'll actually put your wheel out of balance if you've got a really long valve stem. Whereas on this wheel, this is an 80 millimeter fairing, and he's got a valve stem sticking out probably another 50 millimeters. John could actually go with the shorter valve stem here, and still be okay.
So we'll talk about the extender on the.
So making sure you match the all of those numbers, right? You want to have the 700 if you are on a road bike. Most gravel bikes are like they call it 650, but you want a 700 for triathlon. You make sure your wheel width. And it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day. I'm like, well, what width are your tires? I don't know. So then how do you know what tubes to buy? You should once again match the tube width with the tire width, and then looking at the length of the valve stem. In general, they don't really usually charge that much more for a different length valve stems, in my experience.
And then I was just looking for where it says removable core. And
This one does have a removable core.
It does.
I think this is the picture.
It must be, yeah. So the other thing, if you are putting an extender on, and we'll talk about this in just a bit, but where you can lengthen your valve stem by adding a extender on. But you can only do that with tubes that have a removable core. And you want to talk about that?
Well, yes and no, right? Because some you don't need to take the.
That's right.
So it actually depends.
Yeah.
This is I hate to say it depends, but there's different types of valve extenders as well. So John actually has valve extenders like this, which have a hollow end. And those they need a core. Looks like that.
This is the core of your tube.
Yep. So I'm going to open this up. So if you look at this, and I think some people might not even recognize or know that
This is the core.
and so that's sitting right there. And with our little core tool here, so this is a core tool.
Grab that. That's it's a U-shaped type of tool that you get with,
Your valve extender.
yeah, you get it with your valve extender. Right.
So, there it is. So what you do to take your core out is you put this little thing on here, like so, and it's really quite easy. You just turn. You get it started, and now the core comes out. So then we would put an extender on. Now, some extenders require something called Teflon tape. These ones have a little rubber gasket, so you don't need that. And then you put this, squeeze this in, use your tool again, and now you've extended your valve. And but once again, you don't only pretty much use this if you've got really deep section wheels.
Yep.
And or short valve stems. And the truth of the matter is the longest valve stem they commercially make is 80 millimeters. And a wheel like John's, which is 80 millimeters thick, it doesn't quite make it. So you have to have a valve extender on a wheel like John has.
And not all tubes are removable cores. So like
Yeah.
this one is not a removable core. So no matter what you do, you can't take that core out. So if you're using valve extenders, if you're using this type of valve extender, you need a removable core. The other type of extender, you actually don't need to take the core out, but you have to loosen up the locking mechanism of the core. And so if you loosen that all the way up, then you just screw this on top. And then you never tighten that back down because obviously you've got the extender on. I don't use this much at all. This is emergency.
So I use it, it's weird, I only use it when I race. And why I only use it when I race is my rear wheel is a disc wheel, and it has a really short area where I can fit the regulator in.
Yeah.
And so I actually have a 42 that I put an extender on like this.
Yeah.
And then if I need to fill the front, I can take it off.
Okay.
Or should I fill the back, I can take it off really quickly.
Yeah.
If I need to fill the front, I leave it on, I can instantly get it on. I don't have to mess around with those. That's the only time I use that type. I really like this type for everyday riding. Okay, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the actual tube. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about was actually how you do it. Like how do you actually, let's hypothetically say that this tire is flat. Well, how do we get this thing off? You could, manhandle it. Some people do manhandle it and they can get them off. But there's some tools, and John's got a variety of different tools. What are these called?
That is a tire lever.
A tire lever. Sounds like a really good idea to have a tire lever, right?
Yeah, you want good ones too.
Okay, so John and I agreed, since I'm dressed in some work clothes still, that he would actually
I'm going to do it.
the honors and show us how to actually take this off.
All right, so what I do when I'm going to take the tire off, obviously if it's already flat, you've already got the air out. But if you're changing out your tube for whatever reason, you gotta let all the air out. And then the other thing that I do is I start pushing the beads of the tire inside. So, well, my wheels have tires on it, but what you're trying to do is build up some slack on your tire to be able to get off one edge off the wheel. And so what we'll do is we'll just start working the beads, we're pinching it and trying to work that bead into the center of the wheel. And in the center of the wheel, it's a little deeper and you get a little bit more slack then that makes it easier to get the tire off. And then once you work yourself all the way around and you have that in, and again, if you've got a tubeless system, it's a little different, and those beads are really hard to get to the center. But even with a tire that hasn't been changed, you may have to really work and you feel it release off the groove on the side of the wheel. So then once you, and you gotta buy good tire levers too.
Yep.
These I don't use at all because they're just too thin and you'll end up breaking them. And that's super frustrating if you've been out riding and you break your tire lever, then you're really running into some problems with getting it.
You can even get ones with metal cores.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah, that's what these are.
Yeah.
These are my good ones that I keep in my or with my bike, and these have the metal cores. And so that is really helpful, and I'm not worried about those breaking on race day especially. And so then it's, different people start at different places with getting the wheel off. Sometimes they'll start at the valve, and sometimes on the opposite end. I have found it just doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
It's like, you'll get people who really get sort of crazy about it. But so now all I'm going to do is work in the pointy end into in between the wheel and the tire and pull that off as best as possible. And what I'll do, if I've got a spoke wheel and I've got these tire levers, I may actually even hook that on to the spoke just to hold it. And then I can take the other one and don't try to move it side to side at this stage, because you can actually, if depending on the type of rim, you can actually damage your rim, or you could damage your tire, or you could even do damage to the tube inside the tire. So now what I'm going to do is find some more space here. I'm going to find my next area where I can fit this in. and pull that off. And usually by the time I get 2 in there, it's gonna get me loose enough that I can take the one here and move it along, or if I can't, I'll just release that, and then I'll move down to the next spot and pull it. Now it's getting nice and loose, and now I can get that started a little bit. And the reason why it's okay at this point is because the tire is loose. Back here, it's too tight, and I don't want to be working at that around. And then I'll use my hand. I'll just pull the bead off. And now I've got one side off. You only need to take one side off. So you don't need both sides off, just one side. And at that point, I can pull the tube out. And if I did get a flat, at this point, I try to be really careful. I'll actually take the tube out and I'll hold it. All right, I'll hold it. And I don't want to change the orientation, because what I'll do next is I'll pump it up with some air, and then I'll try to find where the hole is. And if I can figure out the hole is right here, then I can go back and really zero in on where I'm going to look for some debris in the tire.
Right. And always check for debris in your tire.
Yep, always. All right, so I'm going to put that down. I'm going to leave that. I'm holding that in the still same orientation. I should have my pump ready.
So as John's looking for his pump, what I meant, what we're talking about with debris in your tire. So if there's a piece of glass or a little piece of metal or something that's gotten into your tire, if you put another tube in right away, you'll probably be 5 minutes down the road and it'll be loose again. Or sorry, it'll be deflated again. Or you patch your, let's say you patch your tube, same exact thing. So I always am looking for the culprit. And John was right, like if you can orientate it, great. If you forget, just run your fingers along the inside and outside. At that point, I'll take the tire completely off, flip it inside out, and I'll run my fingers through the whole thing. Yeah, I've done it before. Just threw another tubing, so I was frustrated. And 5 minutes down the road, it's flat again. There's this little piece of glass or something in there, and it's just
a piece of wire,
a little piece of
tire. That's the ones that.
Yeah, the little it's radial tires, exactly.
All right, so now I put some air in the tube, and I start, if I'm on the road doing this, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to run it by my ear, and I'm running it by my eyeball, because that's really sensitive. Now remember, I'm keeping this orientation the same, so once I find the hole, I can go back and figure out where it is. So I'll just work it along until I either hear it or feel it, and then I can find that hole, and then knowing that it's right here, I can line it back up with where my valve comes out, and then I can say, okay, right here, and I can zero in on that. Sometimes I forget, and then I just have to search for whatever caused the puncture. If I'm home, I'll actually take the tube out, I'll take it out back, throw it in the pool, and I'll just wait for the air bubbles to come off. And then you know where the hole is, and you can fix it from there.
But in a race situation, you're not going to use your hand pump, so you're probably not going to do this stuff, right? You're going to just get your fingers in your tire, make sure you.
That's true. That's right. You're right. So if I'm training, I'll do this. I'll pump it up. I'll use my hand pump that I take with me on my training rides. But you're right, on a race day, you don't have that luxury. You just gotta find what caused the flat in the first place. So exactly what Ted's talking about. You just take those fingers and just start feeling around. And you do need to be careful, because if it is a piece of wire or glass,
poke into your finger,
you can get poked. That's right. My wife actually puts a little cotton ball in her race kit, and then she uses that and just looks to see where that gets caught as you go along. But this one obviously wasn't flat to begin with, but this is where I'm just looking for.
And it's worth taking that extra 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Because you will flat again if that does. Now sometimes you'll get a puncture where literally you'll just puncture, it'll go in and go out, and you won't find it. You might actually find a cut in your tire. You hit a bigger piece of glass on the road. You hit a piece, and it didn't get embedded into the tire, and I mean that's fine, but you always want to check.
All right, so once I find the hole, if I'm putting in a brand new tube, then if I'm on the road, I do tuck this away. We don't want to be littering out there. If I'm training though, I actually do take a flat kit with me. So I'll take this with me with a couple of patches and some glue. And I'll take the time to fix it on the road, as long as I'm not in a hurry. If I'm in a hurry,
If
I'll
he's
just.
commuting to work and his class is gonna start in 20 minutes,
Throw the tube in.
throw the tube in.
And then I'll patch the other one.
Yep.
And switch it out later. So now you've got the new tube or the patch tube, and now you've got to put it back in your wheel. And I start at my valve. And put that in. And now you just want to be careful to not twist the tube at all. You don't want to twist the tube as you do this, because you don't want it getting knotted up inside the tire, because once you start pumping up, if it's knotted, it's just going to pop. So you've got to be careful with trying to get it in there and not to twist it. If I'm home or if I've got my hand pump, I'll put a little air in here to give it some shape. So I'll give it a pump.
So on the road, what I do is I literally undo this and I'll just blow one time in. So it kind of ends up looking like this. So then you can keep it from twisting.
Yeah. And so now I work it in, it's a little easier. Easier to keep the right shape and the right orientation, so there's no twisting. And that looks good. And then at that point, you got to deflate it again, because you don't want any pressure on the tire, or as little pressure on the tire as possible. So it's easier to put back into the wheel. All right, so now again, people will talk about starting at the valve or starting at the opposite end of the valve. I'm okay either way. It's not,
Doesn't make a difference.
yeah. Sometimes I like finishing at the valve so I can use this to sort of push back up.
Yeah.
And get that bead in. But now we're just going to start working that bead in. Just using the hands. And I'm making sure that as I'm putting the bead in, that the tube is not getting pinched between the bead and the wheel. So I'm watching for that. And I'll do one more check on that too. And working pretty symmetrical here. And I'll just, if you're lucky and you got a really loose tire, this may all fall right in place. If you're, but most of the time you're not going to have that luxury, because your tires are maybe pretty tight. So what I'm also going to do is double check that the beads, both sides, are sort of in the center of the wheel. I'm also pulling it towards me to get as much slack on this side as possible. And then I can use my levers again. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my hand here and I'm going to hold that tire so it doesn't move where that bead is in the wheel. Because once I start doing this, it's easy just to sort of chase that bead moving that keeps coming off as you go along. So I'm going to hold that with my hand. Now I'm going to turn my lever pointy side in. And I'm going to just pop that in. I'm going to just do a little by little. And again, I'm holding over here so that that bead doesn't move. If I don't hold that, the bead is just going to keep moving along and I won't be able to catch up to it. And right there at the end, pop that last part in. This tire is pretty loose, so this is an easy.
That was an easy job, yeah.
I've worked on some that were really fought the whole time. Okay, so now once I've got the bead all the way in, I'll start at the valve, and only so that I remember, when I get back to it, that I've gone through the whole tire. And I'll just pinch the tire, and I'm going to look inside on both sides and make sure that that tube is not outside of the tire. If I see the tube, there's the potential for it getting pinched as I start pumping it up. So I'll work it all the way around, make sure there isn't any tube there. And I'm good. And so at that point, you just got to pump it up.
That's what we got to do.
And as you pump it up, you want to do CO2?
We should show them how to do it during the road.
All right, CO2. So most of you will be carrying a valve and some CO2. When you buy your CO2, know if you need to buy threaded or non-threaded. It all depends on your chuck that you've had here. This one's a threaded one, so it has to have only the threaded CO2. I haven't used this one in a while, so.
Well, and honestly, most of the bike manufacturers now, it's all threaded.
No.
Yeah. I haven't seen a chuck or a regulator that's not been threaded in a while.
Right, so I gotta remember how this one works. So this is good practice for me. So you tighten it all the way in. So I've got on this, I've got a little dial right here that once I start releasing it, let's see which way it is. Okay, it's letting out some air. So I've got that closed off. Yours may not be like that. Yours may be no valve here, and all you need to do is start untwisting the CO2 cartridge, and then that will release the air.
The one I have is actually spring loaded, so I put it on, and then as if I want to put air in, I actually push it.
Oh, nice.
And it's spring loaded. I like yours though. I really like having that little you can really control your air.
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to use the whole canister. You don't need to use the whole CO2 cartridge. I can actually close it off once I get enough air in there, pull it off, put it in my back pocket because I may need it again. And you can usually get, a couple of tries out of it, depending on the size of the CO2.
They make a couple different sizes. The most common is 16 grams, and then mountain biking I think you use like 20 grams.
Yeah. And that's that. And then I'll go ahead and close my core valve. You actually don't need to, but what that does is just keeps it from popping open as you go along, because it takes the air pressure to open it up, and that's what gets the air inside. And so that's
Wow,
it.
that went pretty smooth.
That did, and it went smooth because that was a super loose tire.
But, a couple of things I think we need to reiterate is there are many different types of these.
Yeah.
You should practice with yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people don't like to burn through a CO2 or whatever, but do it once or twice in your garage or in your house so you're comfortable with your setup. The other thing is, John was mentioning, you haven't used it in a while.
Yeah.
If they get old, there's seals inside of it, little rubber gaskets.
Mm-hmm.
And especially where it's really dry, like here, those can break. And I've had that happen to me before, where it was 2 or 3 years I hadn't used it for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like, oh, okay, well, go out. And next thing you know, it wouldn't work. And literally the seal, the gasket inside was cracked. And so you gotta use your equipment. You gotta practice with your equipment that you have. And you want to be proficient with this. We talked a little bit about that before. Many people I've talked to talk about, oh, I was in a race and I got a flat tire and it ruined my whole race.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it shouldn't ruin your race if you're prepared,
Right.
And I think we talked about the anecdote of Lionel Sanders talking about how one time it took him like 10 minutes to change a tire, and he was so upset with himself that he put a tire and a wheel in his house in the hallway, and every time he passed it, he changed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he can now do it in 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 minutes, especially in a long distance race, that's not gonna do anything to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is something that, just like every other skill that we talk about in triathlon, you should practice and you should be proficient at doing this. And for me, sometimes even when I'm on the road and I have a flat,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like, I'm gonna try and do it fast.
Yeah.
This is a race. I'm gonna try and do it fast. Now, when I commute, I don't know about you, and when I'm training, I always have 2 tubes and 2 CO2.
Yeah.
So I get the one I go fast, if it doesn't
Mhm.
work,
Yeah.
then I get the backup, I take my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually always carry a pump as well with
I do,
me
yeah.
too. But I like to practice as if it was a race every now and then. The other thing I will also tell you is you will get flats.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is endemic in riding bikes, and in Nevada in particular, after it rains, we get a lot of the cactus come up, or just debris from the road. There's no way to avoid getting flats. Now you can do things to mitigate it. So John, what can we do to avoid getting a flat?
Well,
Other than not ride?
yeah, right. Good beefy training tires.
Yep.
That's the #1 defense, and good beefy tubes. So these are not This tube I might.
This
race on.
this one's a race tube.
Yeah, okay,
That's a thin one.
that's a decent tube, but I've got tubes that are a little beefier. And you can see this one's actually been patched. This one's good. And when I do have one that I know needs to be fixed, I always knock them up so I don't get them confused with my good tubes. But beefy tubes and beefy tires for your racing or for your training.
Yeah, so you can buy tires that are specifically graded to basically puncture resistant.
Mhm.
When we race, there's always going to be this balance between speed and puncture resistance.
Yeah.
And for a while there, I was racing on some pretty sketchy wheels or tires, but they were really fast. And so I took the risk, and the risk always worked out. I never got a flat in a race when I was riding these those tires. They were back in the day, like 5 years ago, Victoria Corsa Speed, the first generation. They were very thin, but they were super fast. So it's a balance that you want to play. Like there's the story of is it Andy Potts who rode the gator skins.
Yeah,
that's what these are. They're very, very puncture resistant. We rode them at the Icona because they didn't want to have a flat. But when they calculated it out, it may have cost them 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a lot of technology in tires that can make a significant difference in how fast you go. And John and I have done some research specifically on this and looking at rolling resistance. And there's lots of websites you can look at that talk about the rolling resistance of different tires. And then there's also different tire tube combinations. And so John's actually brought out some latex tubes.
So this is a thinner tube. It's a very stretchy tube. It's actually really quite durable.
Yep.
But they also, and so they have lower rolling resistance, so they're a faster tube. But they also lose air every night. And so it's always a pain in the neck having to pump them up.
But they ride really nice.
Yeah. So these go on my race wheels. And these are not patchable.
No, you can patch them.
Do you patch them?
Oh yeah. I
do.
mean, I don't, but I have a friend that you will probably have 10 patches in one.
Yeah.
In one of those, you can patch them. The downside, like you said, the biggest downside of them, well, they're more expensive.
Yeah.
So they're about double the price. But if you just use them for racing, and I'm the same, I use mine for racing as well. But they are just as durable. Like I don't get any more flats.
Yeah, no, they are very good.
I think there used to be a myth that they had a better chance of having a flat with them. I don't find that to be true at all.
No.
But yeah, so latex tubes, they're a little bit of a challenge to put in. They tend to pinch a little bit more. So when John was like pushing that bead in, the one thing about them, because they're usually a color, they're usually pink or green, you can actually see it a lot easier. It's gonna not be seated properly. But I personally have always raced with the latex tubes, and I know you do too, because you're looking at probably, if you're talking about buying speed or free speed, you have to pay for it. It's probably not much better bang for your buck than a set of latex tubes. I think is it 2 or 3 watts per wheel?
Yeah, no, it is. And so one of the things to go faster, so you put on good racing tires and good tubes.
Yep.
And that's why I have a different wheel set, because I don't like changing them that often. So
no, I'm with you. Yeah.
It's easier to just pull off another wheel that has the right racing wheel and tire and the right tube, and put that on.
And we've talked about this in the past. Like for me, the bigger races of the year, my 8 races of the year, it's a new tube and a new tire every time. And I know that sounds weird that they're not. I don't use them that much in my racing tires, but after 300 miles or so, I put new ones on because I just don't want to take any risks. So ultimately what can happen is you can actually get a piece of debris in your tire and it'll work its way through, especially glass. And it's just one of those risks I don't want to take, especially nowadays with the race being so expensive.
Yeah, right.
And I said, 2 or 3 minutes isn't going to win the race, but it's not going to make it any better either. So personally, I always do that.
Yeah, and that's what you reminded me when you said, you know, check out your valve. I actually got to double check that this one's still good. And
Still better.
because our races are, you know,
It's better.
our races are,
Don't do it.
our races are expensive, and this is $4.
Well, I buy them cheaper than that usually.
Yeah,
I buy them in bulk.
Even $4 at an expo,
Yeah.
you know, then check your truck, make sure it's okay. As opposed to finding out on race day when you actually get a flat and you either don't remember how to work it or it's not working. And I did have that happen where my regulator did not work during the race.
The other way other thing you can do to reduce flats is to run a little bit lower pressure.
Yeah.
So I know that we've talked about tire pressure before, and I always go on the low end, especially with training. Go on the lower end, and you have less of a chance of actually getting a flat, which makes sense. Where there's less pressure on the tire coming from the underside, so when something goes into it, less likely that it's going to pierce it. I wanted to show them this.
Oh yeah. All right.
So this is called a cool stop. So we've mentioned that sometimes it's not easy to get the tires on. So especially race tires, they can be really, really difficult to get on. And this little thing is, they call it a tire jack. Officially. Actually, we have to take that off to put it to use it, right? Use this to put it on.
I actually haven't used it. I have it, but I haven't used it.
So we have to take this off.
Okay. Oh, I'll take it off.
So we take that off, and I'm going to teach John how to use a
There you
tire
go.
jack.
Yeah.
So when I used to run those courses speeds, they were the tubeless version, so they were really, really tight. And the only way I could get them on when they were new was this. Oh, one other pro tip: if you're having trouble getting your tires on because they're too tight, so if they're new, throw them in your dryer. Just get a couple of towels, throw them in your dryer for like 10 minutes. They will be a lot more pliable. The other thing is, if you're here in the summer, it's a summer day, just put them out on your driveway.
Yeah.
Seriously, I've done that before. It's like 10 minutes out on your driveway when it's 110 degrees. The tires go on a lot easier. But you will notice, especially in the winter when it's really cold, the tires are they're a little bit more difficult to get on. So this is made by Cool Stop, a sponsor of our program. So,
Zoom it.
yeah. So what we do is we stick. Yeah. So this end goes on the rim, and then this end goes on the bead of the tire, the edge of the tire. So what this does is just basically wedges it on. So it slides just like that. And obviously it's pretty easy in the beginning to get this on. We'll show you actually when it's tighter.
Yeah, we were doing a study on tires and wheel widths, and we were changing out a lot of tires, and there were some that were really difficult to get off, but then to get back on as well.
So it's on now, and what I'm doing is I'm just using it just like that, and then move along. Oh, I missed that one. Not perfect. Normally, it's a little better position. And once again, this works a lot better with it. It worked perfect. But when you've got a really tight tire, something like this will.
Yeah.
But my thought is if I've got to use this, and it's a really tight tire, and it's so tight that I don't know if I can do that in a race, I might not want to do it.
Yeah. Right.
The last set of tires I bought, Continental came out with a 5000 GPS for tubeless, and it's supposed to be the lowest rolling resistant tire. I'm like, okay, the last Ironman we did, I'm like, oh, that's what I'm thinking. I want those tires.
Yeah.
Well, I literally could not get them on. And finally, after battling for like 40 minutes and heating them up and everything, I'm like, okay, it's on.
Yeah.
I can't race with that.
Yeah, right.
Because I can't have that battle during 40 minutes to get a tire on during a race. So I scrapped the idea and went with the standard version. So yeah, when you're buying your tires, unless you're running tubeless, I suggest don't buy a tubeless tire. They're even tighter. And they need to be to basically hold on to the rim. What else we got?
Well, when you're working with carbon wheels, make sure that your levers are plastic.
Yeah, they can have metal cores.
Yeah, they have metal cores. Core is okay, but metal levers are not okay with carbon wheels.
Yeah. Although I do know some people that use metal ones with them. They're okay, but it just to be safe, that would be a good idea. How about oh yeah, that thing I was going to tell you is if you fill it with CO2, that's only good for a while.
Yeah.
And because the carbon dioxide molecule is smaller than just our general air, it'll leak through the tube. So if I have to repair on the road or whatever, I make sure when I get home, take the air out, take the carbon dioxide out, and put in just regular air. Yeah, because it will leak out. Even worse in a latex.
Yeah. And make sure you put one of these in your tool bag if you've got either a front or a rear wheel that's deep. Because let's say you run out of tubes and someone else is going to give you the tube, they may not have the right extender on there. So pack your extender and pack your little core removing tool. So they do make more sophisticated ones, but I don't pack that. I just pack that little plastic piece. But you've got to have a good tool. And we did a toolkit one before. We may need to do that again. This needs to be in your bike tool bag.
One of the things I was going to add is we were talking about the names of these. So this is a Presta valve. And for those of you that have been around a while, your old bike tire may have had a Schrader valve, same as that's on your car. So it's a wider valve, and I'm sure everyone's seen them on their car. But they make bike valves that are bigger. They're called Schrader. Once again, you're going to probably have a Presta. One of the things I keep in my toolkit is a converter. So you can actually spin a little thing on, and it'll act as a Schrader. And it actually saved me once, where a guy I ran out of CO2 and I didn't have my pump with me, and a guy had a little compressor in his car. And he pulled over. He's like, "Need help?" I'm like, "Oh man, I gotta, you have a bike pump?" No. It's like, "Hey, I got a compressor in my car for my tires." And I'm like, "Perfect." And I had the little adapter, filled her up.
Nice.
And they weigh nothing. They're about like this big. So I've kept one of those in my back before.
That's great. And the beauty of the Presta. Now the Schrader, you need a special device to activate or open the valve to let the air in the tube. But the Presta is not that way. So the Presta, this is the outside end of the Presta here that you would see on your tube. And what happens is, and this is good to know because it's sort of when you're pumping your tire up, this is just good to know. When you put the pump head on your valve, you only need to put it on there so it's got a good seal. It doesn't need to push down. You're not pushing this down with the pump head. When you start pumping your air in, it pushes that in, and that opens up the valve on the inside of the tube, and that's what lets the air go in the tube. And then when you're recoiling the pump, it will close because the air pressure will push that back out.
It's actually really quite ingenious.
It really is. And so all you need to do is this just has to, I'm not going to be able to do it here, I don't think. It has to sit tightly on the valve, on the core, but you don't need to push it down. You're not trying to push this down while you're putting your pump chuck on. Did I explain that well?
Well, I think you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess that's it. We covered changing a tire. So hopefully I'm really hoping you're never gonna have to use this.
You will.
But you will. But I'm hoping you won't.
Yeah,
I'm hoping this weekend you don't have to use it. How about that?
that's good.
It's inevitable that it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But and I gotta be honest with you, the other reason to get good at it is if you're working with a group or you're riding with a group a lot, people don't want to wait,
Yeah,
right? So you're out there 10 minutes trying to change a tube and everyone's waiting for you, and it can be very nerve-wracking for you.
yeah, that's right.
And so be good at this, and you'll be less of a burden on your group rides.
Mhm. Well, and when we do practice in person, that's good to practice taking your wheels off when your bike is not on a bike a tool stand.
Yeah.
So that is a little bit of a trick to make sure that you're able to get your wheels off, and then you put your front end or rear.
All right.
All right, good deal.
Stuff. A little bit shorter tonight, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It was a tech note.
That's right. And if you enjoy producing podcasts, give us a shout so we can do this a different way. All right, thanks.